Hello, everybody. This is the Air Pollution Control District public meeting on Fourth Technologies. We'll get started here in just a minute. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us. This is the Air Pollution Control District Fourth Technologies public meeting. We're going to give a few brief opening remarks, but hopefully pretty quickly jump into questions and comments and try to have a discussion here. I want to give a quick rundown of who I think you're seeing on your screen with air pollution control. We have Keith Talley, who's the agency director. We have Rachel Hamilton, who is the assistant director. Stephen Gervette, who manages the compliance and enforcement section. Kyle Zimmerman, who's the community compliance supervisor. Tom Nord, who's the agency's communications specialist. I'm Matt King. I manage the permitting section. We have Eva Addison, who's a permitting supervisor. Randy Schoenbachler, who's a permit writer assigned to this facility. And we have Andy Purdon, who is our technical expert and is our host for the meeting this evening. So special thanks to Andy for helping us out. Hopefully it will run smoothly. I would like to ask Andy to quickly give a few instructions so when we open up, folks will know how they can either raise their hand or speak. Andy, could you give a few remarks on that?
Yes, thank you, Matt. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick. Those who wish to raise your hand in your participant list, if you're connected by computer, you will actually have a raised hand icon, and I will bring that up here so that you can see that. Okay. I thought I actually had that pulled up here. There's a, if you hover over your name in the participant list, a raised hand or a hand icon will appear. You can click on that and it will allow you to raise your hand and ask a question. If you are dialed in on phone only, just press *3 and that will raise your hand also. And we will call on you in the order in which the hands are raised. I already have one question from Maria in the question and answer. She wants to know if video will be, of attendees will be allowed during their speaking time, and attendees, it will be voice only. There will be no video. So the only video you will see is of the panelists who are there now. Okay.
Thank you, Andy. Again, we're going to try to get pretty quickly into your all's thoughts and questions, but I would ask Randy Schoenbacher to give a brief statement as to what the facility does in regards to their air pollution control permit.
All right. Fourth Technologies is a chemical and pigment manufacturer, which provides mixing, blending, filtration, grinding, milling, and packaging, as well as chemical reaction processes. In general, Fourth routinely handles bulk acids, solvents, pigments, and metal salts. Equipment at Fourth includes process tanks, filter presses, spray dryers, tray dryers, hammer mills, dry blenders, baggers, reactors, mixers, classifiers, boilers, chillers, heaters, and pumps. Fourth Technologies is a potentially major source which has applied for a synthetic minor federally enforceable district origin operating permit, which limits emissions from the facility to those of a minor source. Fourth Technologies operating permit includes District Regulation 7.06, standards of performance for new indirect heat exchangers, 7.08, standards of performance of new process operations, and 7.12, standard of performance for new storage vessels for volatile organic compounds, and other generally more applicable regulations apply as well.
Thank you, Randy.
No, you're welcome.
Just to give a little background, this is a renewal operating permit for the facility. We renew these permits every 5 years. And we public notice, as we do with all permits in this category. We received numerous comments and extended the comment period. It's traditionally a 30-day period. We ran a 60-day with this. And some of the neighbors suggested a more informal discussion, and that's what we're doing this evening. Just by the category of the permit, as you know, we call it FEDUP, but it stands for a longer list of words. We do understand we sometimes speak our own language. This evening, we're really going to try to talk directly at folks, but we will apologize if we get into our own jargon, and don't hesitate to ask for clarification, and we'll try our best to help explain things to folks. So this, again, is a public meeting. That's not a term in our regulations, unlike a public hearing, which is. A public hearing, which occurs for several different agency actions, is a very formal process where folks make a statement. We receive those statements in that hearing, record those statements, and provide a written response at a later date. That is a meaningful part of the process, but often is not the best way to exchange information. So you may see more of these in the future, but this is our first public meeting, which we have had for regulatory actions, but for a permit itself. And we are hoping to run this smoothly and give everyone a chance to speak. But bear with us as the technology and the process is somewhat new to us. I do want to note that we're recording this event, and it will be posted and made available for anybody who couldn't attend. We, again, are renewing an operating permit for Fourth Technologies. We're also aware of some significant odor complaints in the area, but really this is going to be open to anything folks want to talk about in regards to the air pollution, the permit, and Fourth Technologies. So I believe we've done introductions, given a brief remark, but again, ask questions. We can try to inform a little better, but I think we're ready to open up to folks. And Andy, I'll ask you to start with our first speaker, please.
Okay. I do not have any hands raised currently at the moment.
Let's give folks a chance to speak up, but we could also run through a few more things in the permit if that'd be helpful. But let's see if we have.
Just a reminder, if you dialed in, press *9. That will give me a raise back signal.
I think
and
that's.
If you're on your computer, you have the option when you hover over your name as a participant to raise your hand.
Hey, Andy.
Clarify, I think that's star. Or go ahead. Yes.
It is *3.
It's actually *3. It was *9. Thank you for the correction. I've been saying *9 for a long time. Okay. Scott Dobson has a question, and I will unmute him. Scott, you are unmuted. You can ask your question.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. It's actually not a question. Want to introduce myself. My name's Scott Dobson. I'm general manager for Forth Technologies. Just kind of want to introduce ourselves. I know there's some comments that we read that, kind of wanted us to engage more with the community, and we hope that this can be the first step to that. Tell you a little about myself. I'm a local guy, University of Louisville, Speed Scientific School. Started Forth in '98. Been there ever since. Forth Technologies. Randy gave a decent explanation, but I thought I'd tell you a little more about us. We're a small company. We were started back in the early '90s. We've been in the Bergman Street site since 1996. It's our only operating site. We're completely family owned. We have about 25 employees, some of them from the local neighborhood. So, we are very interested to hear comments and be able to kind of explain some of what we do. We're mainly toll manufacturing for pigments is the big thing we do. Mostly organic pigments. Could be anything that has color to it, whether it's blue, red, automotive paints, pigments that would go into automotive paints, plastics, inks. Pigments in general are non-hazardous. They just have to be. Some of these pigments are used in medical devices, and some are cosmetics, some are more industry specific, but they are in general they are going to be a non-hazardous chemical when finished. There's been some information put out about the sewer odors, and I just kind of wanted to explain what Forth Technologies has done. We actually noticed it probably back in 2017, but there's been odors out of the sewers for longer than that. 2018, it got a lot more detailed as far as what we were looking for. It was, I think, initially misdiagnosed as a lignite. We've kind of proven that not to be the case. We've done a lot of testing. We've spent a lot of money to find out what this is. We have, back in 2019, MSD has done, we've been working with them to fix this issue. First had to find out what it was. They've done a lot of sampling. They actually had a 24-hour sampler in. It would pull a sample every hour to be able to, send it out for analysis. It was initially kind of reported that it was an acetone-based odor. So that's what we investigated. We've since found out acetone does not react well with hydrogen sulfide. Acetone is almost like a base molecule. It's just not a very reactive thing. But from that, we were able to determine a different chemical, methyl oxide, that's formed in a much smaller quantity, part per trillion level, that we believe is reacting with the hydrogen sulfide gas in the sewers and causing the smell. So what we've done is we hired a group to do the actual reactions to prove that out. We get no odor with acetone. We would actually inject hydrogen sulfide gas, basically sewer gas, into the containers, but we were able to reproduce it with methyl oxide. We've also done a lot of analytical testing, but unfortunately with methyl oxide, you're talking parts per trillion level, and there's just, it's very tough to test down to that level. So basically the best thing to do is inject it with the gas, and then you can smell it, because you can definitely smell it at part per trillion level. Once we found that out, we made some changes to our process, using holding tanks that we had, that we weren't using. We were able to tighten down how we neutralize it, and we were able to do that September of last year, and so far we've been very successful with that. If I look at Smell My City, I follow that app. You can actually download the data. We have not had a complaint since September of 2019. And there's only been 4 smell complaints in 40203, the Shelby Park area, in all of 2020. And none of them had to do with cat urine. I know that's just one, small way, but that's the easiest way for me to get data. So I think we have made progress. I think we've responded. We've made changes, and we're still working with MSD. I know they've put in some, the manhole covers. I don't know how much everyone's aware, but that whole area, or the whole area there, is combined sewers. So you're basically, a lot of the manholes just vent right from the sewer, and they have to do that in case there was a significant rain event. It used to overflow into Beargrass Creek. Now they've got the Logan Street interceptor. But the kind of the fail safe is to go right through the manholes. So they have to keep those open. So they've put in some carbon packs on those to help scrub out not only, if there was cat urine smell, they could also, hydrogen sulfide or any organics. I know they've done some work on Ormsby to replace a catch basin. We've done a lot of work ourselves as far as getting, like I said, getting our process to where we're able to collect more of it. And then one of the testings, when they were doing the 24-hour test, we were basically getting plug flow through the system. So you would get all that flow over at one time. So we've since added some volume to where we can distribute that a little better. But I'd also like to put those that are in the Shelby Park neighborhood. I assume there's some on here. I know one of the comments was we would like Fourth to engage and a spokesperson to come to our meeting. And I'm here to say that's going to be me. I know we got I think someone coming up in mid-July, and we are fully willing to engage and look forward to it. Appreciate the time. Sorry to talk so long. Thanks.
Okay, Andy, do we have, looks like several hands up. Can you call our next speaker?
All right. The next hand that I had was Abby Long. Abby, you're unmuted if you'd like to speak now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You can.
I'm just wondering when the last full compliance evaluation was at Fourth Technologies.
So we were on site and did a full compliance evaluation in the EPA fiscal year 2016. So it was about 4 years ago. They'll be due this upcoming fiscal year. So probably in the next 8 to 10 months, we'll be out there to do a full compliance evaluation. We were out on site in 2018 when we were doing the investigation for the odor, and we review their reports as they come in.
Okay, what does a full compliance evaluation entail?
It entails an on-site inspection and reviews that the reports that have come in the past 5 years have been reviewed, and if there was anything wrong, reported in them.
We're going to try to leave folks unmuted for a little bit. You can certainly get back in the queue, but if folks want to take a little time to think and ask a follow-up question, that might be helpful. So free to take a few seconds, or if you want to move on to the next person, let us know.
Yep, you can go to the next person.
Thanks.
Okay, the next person that I have is Maria Gurin. Maria, you are unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Sorry, I'll let you all know we were anticipating a little bit different format. So I've been fielding some text messages from folks about how they can speak and how this is all going to work. I think we thought that we would have video capability as well and also be able to all see each other. So we're kind of adjusting a little bit. But I did want to start out and thank you, Scott, for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time and appreciate your offer to work with us. I just want to give a little bit of background from the neighborhood association's perspective, some of which is going to bring forth technologies and some of which goes a little bit further back than I think when you all were working on this specific issue or maybe aware of it. But there have been complaints from Shelby Park residents back since 2010 that have been lodged via 311 on East Ormsby and just the blocks surrounding that. And in early 2018, there were discussions held among the neighborhood association that led to the involvement of a lot of different agencies, including alley cat advocates because it was a cat urine type of smell, LMPD because there was some thoughts that it could be methamphetamine production, and then that was ruled out. And it was a lengthy process that involved a lot of back and forth between agencies, and the source of the smell was still unidentified even after our initial work with MSD as well as APCD. So then in December of 2018, it was determined that the odor was coming from the sewer, and an air pollution control district engineer and compliance officer actually visited Fourth Technologies, and at that point agreed that the smell that they were smelling was similar to the odor they were smelling on site. And we as a neighborhood were informed that there would be some sort of corrective action, but then after not hearing anything, in June of 2019, we still hadn't gotten a response. And so that prompted additional communication, after which MSD came to our July 2019 meeting. And we were actually told that the smell was a mix of acetone and hydrogen sulfide. And I think that one of the biggest concerns of the neighborhood is that at this meeting, we directly asked the representatives there from city government if the combination of these chemicals could be physically harmful or detrimental to our health. And we were told no. And so we asked if that would be put in writing. And we were pretty much laughed at and said, no, we don't do that. And we wouldn't put that in writing for you. And so that just left a lot of concern that we didn't have confirmation that what we were smelling for sure wasn't something that was potentially harmful. So then in February of 2020, MSD published an article claiming to have solved the odor area and didn't identify a business for that. And then in March of 2020, an open records request revealed that Fourth Technologies has 5 incidents or citation reports for noncompliance and or deficient testing procedures. We also had some concerns, and maybe you can speak to this, about pH levels that range from 2 to 13, which is, highly concerning considering how, that spreads pretty much the full range of possibilities of pH levels and kind of what's going on with that. And then that also led to us getting a list of the hazardous chemicals that are used at Fourth Technologies, and some of those are associated with acute toxicity, respiratory sensitization, serious eye damage or eye irritation, and skin corrosion or irritation. So that gives a background a little bit of kind of what the neighborhood has been dealing with for years and years in order to try to identify the smell, but also get to the bottom of whether or not this smell is potentially harmful to our health. So it's interesting to hear that according to Fourth Technologies, the cause of the smell is actually a different chemical. So I think that we've just kind of had to jump through a lot of hoops and still don't have any answers. And so if we could have a discussion about exactly what the smell is, are we sure, and what the potential health effects of that are, I think we'd really appreciate it.
Thanks. Real quick before we get into that, Andy, is it even possible to show all attendees on camera if that's helpful? I'm not asking you to do it, but I don't even know if that's an option.
We would actually to promote all the attendees to us to give them video capabilities, and I'm not sure if it automatically when they're permitted.
Okay. Well, and I apologize for that. I'd rather not attempt to try that and have issues, but we'll certainly take under consideration for future meetings that at least some folks want to be on camera. I'm a big fan of in person. Obviously, that's not a good thing right now, but apologize for not having a good description of how this would work. But we really are trying to, we keep using the term informal, and I said no one has to wear a tie, but really we don't often dialogue with people, one-on-one meetings, but we're going to try our best and apologize for not having all the video up. Does anyone want to describe this or talk a little about that on the panel? But I will say that odors, a lot of this stuff is confusing and challenging, and I think we have some good information, but I don't think we have 100% certainty as to what the cat urine smell is. I think we're all pretty certain it's related to the hydrogen sulfide mixing with other chemicals that seem to be coming from Fourth, and Fourth has attempted to and seems to have a grip on this, but there's nothing certain when it comes to odors. I will say, though, I apologize that the meeting didn't go very well, but hydrogen sulfide alone, especially in high concentrations, if people go in the sewers, they can die. So it is a very real substance. Those concentrations are nearly impossible to get in the open air above ground, but in and of itself, it can do damage, and certainly those other chemicals do have real effects, but that's why we limit these emissions and use that science and health data to help establish regulatory limits for those things. Rachel, do you want to talk a little about the odor? You're muted still.
I'm muted because it's usually my dogs that are barking and not Andy's dogs that are barking, so I apologize in advance. Squirrel goes by. With respect to this odor, this is one that was challenging for APCD just as it was for the community. Our folks are trained to look for odors in the usual places, at the catch basins, for example, the sewer system, because sometimes they dry out, at people's homes, particularly in a neighborhood like yours where downspouts may have been connected to the sewer system. We actually got to the point in trying to track down this odor where we pulled together a multi-agency team, conducted an inspection, and then ended up on our knees at the manhole covers. That's where we discovered that there was an issue related to the sewer system itself. It was then at a conference where we spoke to some fellows from the North Carolina DEQ who had a mystery cat pee odor in Wilmington that we connected the sewer system and its hydrogen sulfide that's there naturally occurring is a place where there could be secondary formation of another chemical. The chemical that apparently is causing the odor here is a thiol, very much like a mercaptan, like a scent natural gas line. A little bit goes a long way. It's very, very stinky. It's very, very low concentration. That's why APCD directed MSD, because they have jurisdiction for that sewer system and for the wastewater discharge that comes from Fourth Technology that's actually forming this chemical compound as it travels down East Ormsby to intersect into Preston. The company has worked with MSD to address their odor forming potential. Scott, if you would like to answer the issue related to your pH and other operations with your wastewater discharge system, that's a little outside the scope of APCD's permit, so we'll turn that back over to you to answer.
Okay, so we run a lot of different pHs. We have a continuous wastewater treatment system. It's continually monitored for pH. I can't speak intelligently of the 2 to 13. We try to keep it around a 8.5 for there's some constituents in there that we want to remove. So generally our target is 8.5. For this product, we've actually run that down closer to 7.5. We want it slightly basic, and that's where we get the best control at. So that that's our set point that we run at. As far as having the odor for many years, that's what's hard about it, because I mean we've been told I have firefighters come through. We talk about it, and they say this odor's been present for decades. And all I can do is control what I put in. I can't control the hydrogen sulfide. That's naturally, and it's all throughout Louisville. I've looked through a lot of complaints, and there's parts of Louisville it looks like it's worse than others, but there's a large sewer main that runs right down Ormsby to Preston. It's probably 100 years old, and as long as it's combined sewers, that odor is going to be present. But I can control the acetyl oxide. We've proven that we can do that, and that's what we're going to focus on. That's what we focus on now. We want to be a positive part of the community. That's we're all from here. It's all locally owned. Our kids go here. Our grandkids, live here. I have a son with asthma at home. I know how that is. The last thing we want to do is be the cause of any of this. We would rather not run the product, get rid of the business if we had to, and we will do that. If we're not successful, we will we'll try the things. And part of my list, as I was going to talk about, is we are looking at alternative chemistries to where that wouldn't even be present. We've got it down to one raw material, and unfortunately, it's a key one. But we're working on other ways to be able to do that to make it safer. And that's what I would be glad to discuss it in more detail.
Anyone else from APCD or Rachel, go ahead.
Matt, the Port Technologies has provided responses to the comments that we've received. Those are posted on our website?
Yes, our rules all for the company. As we said, we received a lot of comments. We'll be producing a response to comments document. The company is given a copy of those comments, and they have provided their response. It is posted on the proposed actions page where this hearing was posted in the permit. And there may be some good information for folks where they detail some of the odor investigations. I see a chat that is asking about panelists. I will note it appears attendees. We have 22 attendees currently. Is there, again, anyone from APC that wants to add any to the odor from a wastewater perspective or even a general odor perspective?
I do have some more raised hands.
Certainly. Let's go on to the next question then.
Matthew Rubin wishes to ask a question. Matthew, you have been unmuted. Matthew, are you there? Okay. I'm not getting anything coming through on Matthew. I'm not seeing any voice activity.
Sorry.
Sorry about that, Matthew. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. First of all, I am with Shelby Park Neighborhood Association. I did want to start by saying I appreciate Scott Dobson being present, and we would certainly welcome you at our next meeting or at any meeting. I'll take that as a sign of a good faith effort. I guess my question to the board is, what monitoring do you anticipate being done to make sure their full values are within permissible limits, besides the full compliance evaluation? And related question: if the odor does return in a bad way, are we back at square one as a neighborhood? And what can the public do in assistance to assist with monitoring compliance?
I'm not sure if Kyle or Steve will be best to talk about as citizens' assistance in monitoring for the odor. I'll give them a shot first, but I'm happy to go through some of the monitoring that's in the permit as well for air pollution in general.
Kyle, you want to take that and describe how that helps people?
Yes, if you observe an odor in the future, just if you report it directly to the APCD, we will send a compliance officer out and they will investigate it. As far as being back from square one, I think we've come a long way, and I don't think there is ever a reason to be back at square one. We know that the odor was coming from the sewer. It seems pretty obvious that it was resulting from something that Fourth had been putting in, but it seems like they dialed it in at this point. And we've come a long way, and I don't think we're ever going to be back at square one on this.
I can add that when it's in your neighborhood, these odors can be incredibly frustrating. Just trying to sit on your porch or enjoy your life. So we take that seriously. I get your note about square one. It is a very frustrating process. I know that doesn't give you a lot of resolution, but I'm aware of how frustrating that can be. Certainly, we don't. It's not a lack of trust from the citizens, but it helps us to get those reports so we can get out there as quick as possible and look at it in the statistical sense of when and where and try to put some of this stuff together. Rachel?
Thank you, Matt. One other complicating factor here is the age of your bus neighborhood, and that in the past, Matt, can you mute your mic real quick? Thank you. In the past, your downspouts have been connected directly to the sewer system. Those are straight conduits into the sewer system. They're not trapped to prevent odors from coming from the sewer system. So as a community and a neighborhood, if you will reach out to MSD, they do have a downspout disconnection program where they can provide some financial assistance to have those properly disconnected. That will be one way that you can be sure that MSD system is working the way it's intended, and that is that it's trapped at the catch basin, that they placed filters in the manholes, and that there isn't an open source of sewer odors right up and between people's houses. Thanks, Matt.
I know odor seems to be a big element to this, but just real briefly, and if it's not what you were asking about, I apologize, but with this permit, we are focusing on particulate matter as well as the nitrogen dioxide that can be emitted from a facility and the plant-wide HAP and criteria pollutants. As a fee-dupe, federally enforceable permit, that means they have the potential to be major, but they've taken limits to be minor, and we monitor them to make sure that is the case. So if you have the permit in front of you, or if you pull it up, but that's not necessary, we have them tracking the materials used to estimate those emissions of those plant-wide pollutants. But specifically, we have them looking at the control devices. They have filters and bag houses, which are a multi-filter particulate removal device. They have some condensers, which will cool the air down and pull the vapors back into a liquid so they're not emitted to the air. And we have them checking those, some on a daily basis, some monthly, and it allows them to stay hopefully ahead of any issues with those things, and allows us to check when we're on site and when we ask for records to make sure that those systems are operating as designed. I am not trying to put words in folks' mouth, but I don't think there's as much concern on that, so I won't get too in depth on that more traditional air pollution control, but we can just ask some more questions or point that out as we go along.
Hi, this is Abby. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So it sounds like the PM, nitrogen dioxide, and plant-wide HAPs are calculated and estimated, but is there actual physical monitoring being done by APCD or Fourth Technologies? You're on mute.
From an APCD standpoint, the monitoring we're doing are with gauges on the equipment to ensure it's operating properly. We, measurements of inputs to the system, but our ambient monitoring, where we're actually using sensors to detect what's in the air, that's done at, I believe, about 6 locations around the city. So there is not specific, we use that term monitoring generally and specifically, but there is not a electronic device that is measuring the air quality on the stacks or directly next to Forth Technologies. Our power plants have that type of monitoring in their stacks.
Okay, I have another raised hand for S. Wolf. S. Wolf, you're unmuted if you'd like to speak.
Hi there. My name is Sarah Wolf, and again, I'd like to reiterate my appreciation to Scott for being willing to engage further with the neighborhood association and being a locally owned business and wanting to work with us and join our next neighborhood association meeting. And Andy, I appreciate you acknowledging our frustration, because please also understand what Maria mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, that this has been almost a 10-year process to try to get answers for us. And there's been a lot of back and forth and long periods of time without any sort of follow-ups. So I appreciate this opportunity for this meeting. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that the public comment period is normally 30 days and has been extended to 60 days. And with our upcoming neighborhood association meeting and new information been brought forth during this conversation, if there is still time for us to review this as a neighborhood and get it to folks so that they have a better understanding of what is going on before commenting further and the application being permitted. I've noticed that I have not smelled the odor, so I am hopeful that it is now under control. But I would like for us to have an opportunity as a community to review this new information and to share it with our neighbors and to maybe ask some more questions following our next neighborhood association meeting.
I'll be happy to attempt to answer that, but does anyone else at APCD have a direct answer they'd like to share? Rachel?
I don't have a direct answer, but I do have kind of a comment, and that is that, this odor is being formed within the sewer system, and I hope that MSD will be at your next association meeting as well to help address some of the concerns with respect to their efforts to control the odor from Forth Technology and the efforts that they've taken within their own system. Again, that's outside of the scope of our air pollution permit, but it is part of the solution to the issue here. That's it. Thank you, Matt.
All right, so something I try to not do is set a false expectation, but take it for what you think or how you hear it. The concept of additional time, I think, from a regulatory sense, there has been several requests for a public hearing in conjunction with this public meeting or this permit, and to grant that public hearing, again, that formal process, which would allow folks to comment probably in a virtual setting like this, but we would also take emailed and written comments to the district, additional comments. There needs to be germane unresolved issues with the permit itself. So please don't hear me say every issue is resolved from an air pollution, odor, environmental standpoint. And I have not done our final full review. We've started responding to comments, but we wanted to hear folks this evening and then take a group approach to review those and respond in writing. I'm not seeing a lot that are germane to the permit itself. And again, I don't mean to offend anyone. but more of a regulation that we have not applied in the permit, or we have set the wrong limit. And I know that's difficult for non-professional permit writers to do that. So we're trying to be open to those things. We certainly, as an agency, want to involve the neighbors, but it is not necessarily to a level where we extend things and everyone signs off on it. I'm not expecting folks to be happy or okay with everything we've done. That being said, we would certainly like to hear what you have to say this evening. And as we review those comments, or if any additional germane to the permit things come up, I think a hearing could be scheduled, which would provide a chance for further comments. I do want to be clear, this is a renewal permit, so it's very similar to their current permit, and the facility is authorized to operate. So it doesn't make folks happy, but any delay to this permit is not prohibiting them from operating or emitting, but certainly they have to comply with the permit and they have to comply with our odor regs, and those can be challenging as far as the timing, and we know it does not make most neighbors happy. So not sure about a chance today to extend or to take more comments. Certainly want to hear everything everyone has to say this evening, but I see that as the path if there would be additional official commenting. I will note quickly, and I'm sorry to ramble on, that our board meeting occurs monthly and that there's a comment period at every board meeting for folks to speak on any topic related to air pollution. And as Kyle and Steve had mentioned, as complaints come in, we will communicate with you and investigate. Let's hope we don't get any. And that there is always the ability to email me or send letters in, and we will consider anything that is communicated to us. But that's a little different than an official extension to commenting periods. Hope that at least answered the question, but I'm not expecting it to satisfy everyone. Andy, do we have another question?
Andy, you're on mute if you're talking.
Thank you. Okay. Keith, I saw that your hand was raised. Do you wish to comment?
Yes, thank you. My name is Keith Talley. I'm the director at the Air Pollution Control District, and I really just wanted to follow up on the comment in terms of making odor complaints and filing the complaints. And I wanted to reiterate just how important it is for you to file those complaints. I know we do not operate 24/7, nor do we operate on the weekend, but we take those complaints seriously. And so when you provide them as much information as you can give, because we've smelled the odor, we know that it occurs. So if you can tell us where exactly you smelled it, the time, the duration, all of that information is important. And even if our compliance officers cannot get out to the scene at that particular time, we take that information down, and it gives us information to go to the company and say, at 10:30 Saturday night, we were getting complaints about odors. Were you doing anything different? What processes were you running? And it helps us dial in where we can find the source of that odor. So just because we're not open, because it's on the weekend, the only way that we can address this is if you send us the complaint. So I just wanted to make sure everyone understood how important it was to continue to do that.
Thanks, Keith. Andy, who's up?
Andy, you're on mute.
Keep muting myself, so my feedback. Okay. Any questions that we have here, and question and answer. We have a question from Tom Fitzgerald. Could you run through the permit limits, how they are practically enforceable?
I'm willing to give that a stab unless Randy or Eva would really like to do that. I don't mind giving it a try, but guys, please jump in if I misrepresent anything. Again, Randy is the specific permitter, engineer assigned to this facility. Eva is the supervisor in that section, and I manage 2 permitting sections. Okay, so the, and I say main limits more in a regulatory sense than to give anyone any worry or extra worry. But again, this is a facility that if they ran all day, every day without their control devices, they would be a major source. And in our world, major source comes with extra regulatory applicability as well as monitoring and record keeping and reporting. And so this company, the major source levels for criteria pollutants is 100 tons. This facility is taking a 25-ton limit for the only pollutant, the criteria pollutant they were major for, which is particulate matter. And then for HAPs, hazardous air pollutants, the major source level is 10 tons of any one hazardous air pollutant or 25 tons of combined hazardous air pollutants. They're taking limits at half of those thresholds, 5 tons of any individual HAP and 12.5 tons of the combined HAP emissions. So the facility tracks their inputs to the system. You know, what are they making? What are the mix ratios? How much of those chemicals are going in? Some of their processes are simply mixing, but others, are chemical reactions. So they have evaluated and we have reviewed that chemistry, and that allows you to make pretty solid estimates on the emissions. And again, they're not monitored with an electronic device, but that's very common in air pollution. We think that's changing, in the current realm, but there's still time needed to make that more common. But they track those inputs, they understand the chemistry, they're measuring parameters such as temperatures and things that affect how much is converted into what chemicals. And then you can estimate, knowing what goes out in their products, what goes out in other media, and what's left to go out into the air. So for those hazardous air pollutants, it's a term we often call material balance. It's tracking your inputs, knowing how they're used. Certainly if something's hauled away to a landfill, we don't count that obviously in the air pollution sense, but that allows you to figure out what's left for that air pollution sense. For the particulate matter, again, they're tracking total loading through systems of those dry mixtures. We have stack tested where you measure the efficiency of those particulate filters, and then we can use that throughput, a knowledge of the control, and get those numbers to show how much was emitted of those pollutants. Not super detailed, but hopefully, Tom, if you have follow-ups, you can continue now.
I have a question regarding that.
Okay.
So in their statement of basis, their calculated theoretical emission levels for particulate matters of, I think it's 10 microns or less, is 6.83 tons per year. And this FEDOT permit is allowing 25 tons per year or less. I guess my question is, why is the APCD allowing nearly 4 times higher than their calculated PM10 levels, considering the APCD is responsible for tightening air emissions and you're currently widening that spec?
Yeah, and I understand that could be a frustrating thing and maybe be counter to the overall environmental goals, but it really, in my opinion, is not. Those, if a company has that concept of if you're running all day, every day without controls, and that is not major, as long as it's below 100 tons, they wouldn't need any of those limits. And obviously we couldn't get over those 100-ton marks just by the physical nature of the facility. In this case, this facility has requested those limits. Those are below that major source level. So the mechanism of those limits isn't the end all be all of the permit or the entirety of our strategies to reduce pollution. And so that is below that major source level, so they have not triggered major source status. We want to see folks come in well below their limits. Only in those biggest of new construction projects do we really get into how low can you go? And I'm really trying to not get jargony, but we call that a BACT analysis, best available control technology. That is not required for a minor source. And so we don't specifically, in Louisville or anywhere that administers the Clean Air Act, it's not specifically, and that's not a bad idea, but that the intent of the permit is not to see what the actual emissions are and then hold them to that or slightly above. That we're looking, we have a regulation on the specific units that sets a pound per hour limit. And that's in the regulation. So we put that limit in the permit. They come in below that, and that doesn't mean we lower that limit. The regulation, unless it's changed, that would still be the proper limit. But yes, I think if, the Clean Air Act really was set up to clean the air, but not inhibit business. And I'm not going to weigh in on, is that the best way to go? But you'll see the economy's grown tremendously as the air's gotten cleaner in the last 50 years. But, I understand that folks, and especially in the modern era, they want to see as little pollution as possible, as low of limits as possible. But that's not in the regulatory structure when we're doing this type of evaluation. And I can acknowledge, even hearing myself say that, even though I'm pretty sure what I said was correct, it's a tough answer to deliver to a neighbor. I will at least acknowledge that.
I guess it seems germane and unresolved, considering these are just calculated emissions, and there's no third-party monitoring, fence line monitoring, APC's not monitoring it. Fourth is just calculating it and going by their gauges. Like, I have serious concerns about that. And you're telling me that it's just fine that if the permit's allowing 5 times higher, like, that seems like a huge issue as someone that lives in this neighborhood.
And I'm not encouraging this, but they could even go above those 100-ton major source levels. We have 1,000-ton sources, and that's not a great thing, but that I don't have a regulatory mechanism. But certainly I'm willing to hear about that. If that were to come in as a comment and someone pointed me towards that regulatory mechanism to lower that limit, I would be all for that. We have a really good team of folks, and we don't have that ability through this process. On the point of monitoring, we do on inspections look at purchase records and verify what's being told to us. Again, it's not a sensor or a mechanical device measuring that. And again, I feel like I'm just the bearer of bad news, but the Clean Air Act is predicated on a lot of what I call self-monitoring. And a lot of facilities provide the inputs that go into the emission calculations and things of that nature. We certainly verify. We have a really sharp crew that looks at those numbers, goes into the facilities, unannounced to see if the machinery really is running the way they told us. We have issued violations and certainly returned estimates when they're wrong. And in some cases, we assert our different number and deal with what that number says. And it's not a whatever the company reports is the answer. It's an assessed and reviewed process. But again, I'm with the improvements in the cheaper sensors. The refinery industry has been required by EPA to do fence line monitoring. And that's a gasoline refinery. So it will be a while before it would trickle down to a fourth technologies, but it would give us better insight. I also am not going to specifically comment or criticize or endorse a company, but that is part of the process that unlike, say, a USDA that puts inspectors in a meat facility on a daily basis or in a fishing vessel, we just don't do it that way. But by and large, I find that the companies are pretty accurate in their assessments, and there is a very real threat of any knowing deceit in those reports. And unfortunately, it does happen, but not very often. If anyone's aware of the Volkswagen settlement, individuals went to jail, things like that. But that is not the norm. That is not the common. I'm not saying that every facility does perfect by any means, but your concerns are real, but within the structure of the Clean Air Act and how this is done, there aren't necessarily mechanisms to impose those actions.
Okay, in the clearing the air workshop or the what you need to know about these meetings, I think I read a slide that said the board can adopt rules limiting air pollution, which are stricter than either the Commonwealth of Kentucky or the EPA. So I guess why are you not choosing to do that?
I see Rachel's hand up, but well, she will explain it, I think, fine. And again, it's just our world, but go ahead, Rachel.
I'm going to go ahead and defer back to you, Matt. I do want to note that there are other questions in the queue, so we may need to continue moving on to be respectful of their.
Okay, just really quick, kind of like the MSD, the Metropolitan Sewer District, we're the Air Pollution Control District. We are employees, full-time employees, but we also have a Air Pollution Control Board. That's a 7-member board that's appointed by the mayor, and they do vote to approve new regulations or repeal or change old ones. They also have a role in approving violations over $5,000 and, hold a monthly meeting and have oversight over us as an agency. So they could, and we work with them regularly, but again, as an appointed board, we're the staff, and they certainly could consider and possibly adopt tighter standards. A good example of that is the STAR program, our Strategic Toxic Air Reduction Program, that applies to major sources. That is not a rule in the federal level or state level, but that is not in every case, and it's again, not wrong, but it's not part of the traditional air pollution work to a lot of folks in government talk about use it or lose it budgets, that if you don't spend all your money, you're going to get a smaller budget the next year. That's not a concept in the air pollution world where we look and say, well, you emitted 6 tons, your limit's now 7. I'm not saying that wouldn't clean up the air. There's just not a regulatory process for that. Rachel?
Yeah, Matt has explained the Strategic Toxic Air Reduction Program, which is one place where we have an independent program that goes beyond the federal program. But there are many places in our regulations, and even regulations that Forth Technology is subject to, that are adopted in order for us to come into compliance with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Those are the criteria pollutants that Matt mentioned. In particular, Forth Technology's main emission is particulate matter, one of those criteria pollutants. And so as our area has worked with the Clean Air Act Continuous Improvement Program plan, where every couple of years EPA reevaluates the standard for those criteria pollutants, strengthens them based on the public health-based science. Global Metro Air Pollution Control District is responsible for bringing the area into compliance. And that's where many of the rules that Forth Technology is currently subject to have been developed and are developed specifically for this area to come into compliance. Thanks, Matt.
Andy, who's up next?
Okay, next question that's been in the queue was from Justin Leo. Would just a little more for Scott Thompson? Would you be present at Shelby Park? Visit/tour your facility, show all you do in person.
Not sure if that came through, Andy. I'm getting a little feedback. I hope I sound a little. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was a question back to Forth on would they have the neighbors tour the facility?
Correct.
If Scott wants to answer, feel free. Andy, do you have Scott unmuted?
He is unmuted now. Try it again, Scott.
I will take that back.
Are you still there, Scott? He's kind of flashing back and forth between mute and unmute. What do you use?
Scott, if you can maybe chat that answer back in, but I think it sounded like he's going to need to run that by some folks. Just in the attempt to let everybody get things in, Andy, who's our next speaker?
Okay, next question from Tom Fitzgerald is whether MSD has been cooperating in addressing the odor issues and what responsibilities do they have as a permittee both of APCD and the Division of Water.
Rachel, I think you got your hand up.
I do. MSD has been fairly cooperative with APCD. They are a regulated entity for us. So we can cite MSD for odors from the sewer system, just as we could cite any other business or entity here in Louisville. Tom's question with respect to the Division of Water is one that's outside the scope of APCD's ability to answer. But I will let you know that MSD regulates facilities like Forth under the Clean Water Act through their pretreatment program. If I recall correctly, there is a copy of their pretreatment permit from MSD in the open records request that MSD fulfilled. So on the one hand, MSD has a whole regulatory scheme. They have rules and regulations that apply to their pretreatment customers, and they have taken their regulatory jurisdiction under that program to require Forth Technologies to implement wastewater treatment provisions to prevent the formation of this chemical. So that's how it's working on the water side. And you'll have to ask MSD more specific questions about that program. For us, we identified this odor coming from the sewer system, and we asked MSD to address this issue. It took some detective work. Again, we were able to talk with some of our colleagues at the North Carolina Division for Air Quality about their mystery cat pee odor. There in Wilmington, they have a facility that actually flares off some waste acetone, and apparently it was combining in the ambient air with some hydrogen sulfide from a nearby kind of a swampy area. So once we made that connection, we set up some calls with the fellows in North Carolina and MSD to talk about the potential chemical reactions that may be going on. And once we were able to identify that, MSD worked with the company to come up with a wastewater solution. MSD also did some testing in the system. They did some tracing back to other customers to rule out potential complications or other contributors to the system. And they installed some manhole carbon filters because the integrity of that whole system down there should be like the pipes under your sink. You know, you have that J-trap where the water keeps the sewer odor out of your house. The only place where odor or air should be coming out of the sewer or through the little manhole vent. And indeed, that's where we were able to identify the odor coming from. And in fact, Kyle probably had the best moment of holding it over my head, but we don't train our folks to go stand in the middle of the street, get down on their knees and stick their noses into the vents of the manhole covers. But that's what it took for us to get MSD's attention. And we also, during an inspection, ran into actually sampling the water of their pretreatment customers. They take samples from Forth Technologies waste streams there at East Ormsby on a fairly frequent basis. And Steve Grivette, myself, we were very fortunate to be there when they were sampling. We were able to identify a very similar faint odor from that wastewater stream.
All right, thanks. Andy, who's next?
Okay, next question in the chat was, how certain is APCD that the cat urine smell is the product of the interaction of Forth's wastewater and the organics MSD system?
I think you have varying degrees of certainty. I'm kind of a weird guy that not because it's a good thing, but want to go smell these odors and try to figure them out. It seems to be better in the recent past, and this certainly lines up. The learned experiments that Fourth has conducted line up with what we've heard from that facility in North Carolina. And when Rachel says cat pee, it's actually a chemical called feline, the word feline, capital P, and is like talked about in the wine industry, and not as a good thing, but not as filling up a neighborhood and being perceivable. So there is some science and chemistry there. It sounds like the likely cause, but I personally wouldn't make a guarantee. The proof is in the pudding. So we'll need to keep watching. Certainly Fourth will need to stay on top of this. And again, not because we want to give you all work, but that information from you all will help us too. So I'm going to give better than 50-50 odds that is the issue and it will not be occurring anymore. But I cannot in any way guarantee that. I can guarantee that the district will remain responsive, that will continue to alert MSD and other folks we think might be involved. And it really, it seemed absurd to me when I heard about I said there just might be a stray cat problem when I heard about this, but clearly some more thinkers got involved, and it really seems to be lining up.
I will just add, Matt, that as Scott Dobson mentioned earlier, that they really started to hone in their process in response to what MSD was telling them in September of 2019. And the last complaint that we received from the community was also in September of 2019. So I think we're pretty confident that it is a combination of what Fourth was putting into the sewer system combining with hydrogen sulfide. I think it's very unlikely it would be anything else.
Okay.
Kyle, thank you for that. And I will add, sometimes you get multiple odors from different sources in a neighborhood, and it really is a challenge. But I will commend the folks on this call and the staff that have really worked on this. I don't, in my permitting role, haven't done as much compliance work as I used to, but it does look like a significant gap in being alerted to this, as a city as a whole and as the Air Pollution Control District, because from what's been relayed to me, as we started looking back, we saw what was being described, and it shouldn't take that long. So don't expect you to trust us. Keep your noses open, and we really are working to eliminate that odor, and we think we're on the right track.
Okay, Scott Dobson is ready to, it looks like, get back in here. Scott, I've got you unmuted.
Yeah, so you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. I was talking, but it wasn't going through for some reason. Probably user error. A couple of notes that I've made just listening. One, as we get involved with the neighborhood, I would anticipate, some way for residents, to be able to contact me either through an email or through the neighborhood association, some way that, if there was, anything out of ordinary smell wise that, we could come and find out what that is. My concern is there's other manufacturers in the area. We have a lot of distilleries. We have, I think we've got 3 breweries that are in the area now. All these people have effluent as well. And like I've said, we will control what we can control. And we put things in place, and I'm confident we'll be able to control that, in the Shelby Park neighborhood. And, I just want to shout that we want something in place to be able to respond, because we really and truly, we've never had any contact with anyone there. I didn't even know it existed until, sometime last year. And it's probably overdue that we've made contact, because we have a lot of common interest in the neighborhood. Okay, we've been a long time, long time in the neighborhood. We've seen a lot of things, good and bad, and we're excited to see what's happening there. As far as the plant tour, I will take that to the owners, and we will discuss that. I can't comment on it understand as a toll manufacturer, we are under strict confidentiality with our customers. So that's always a hard thing to do because you just never know. We respect that confidentiality. That's really our business. We don't produce any products under our own name. There is no Fourth Technologies, anything out there. All I do is provide the service to my customers. So that, there's always that that I have to overcome. But I think that's everything. We've taken voluntary limits because we feel strongly that, like I said, we don't want to be we're so far under the limits because we choose to be. When we have issues, we take care of them, and we'll continue to do so. Our goal is to be relevant manufacturers in the future, and you have to do that, and that's what we are going to do. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Scott. The next question that we had on the list is from Chip Rogalinski. What emergency plans for some of the chemicals managed by Fourth at the Bergman site? And is there any form of specific warning system in case of specific chemical spill or release?
I will freely admit this is not our expertise. The city has a strong emergency management agency as well as fire response and things like that. So we do have a role, especially with we administer a federal rule that deals with extremely hazardous and flammable chemicals. This company is not subject to that. So I'm timid to say things like this, but that type of oversight is common in Rubbertown with our large chemical complex there and some really big facilities. And so I can't speak specifically. We don't serve that role as a regulator to have detailed knowledge of those plans. Anecdotally, I will say that this city, from the folks I've worked with in those agencies, has robust plans, has crews that will respond quickly to address that. But I can't, and I'm not sure if someone else would like to at APCD to give a whole lot of detail on that because I just don't have that expertise. Rachel?
So this company, as Matt explained, is not subject to our risk management plan program. But Scott may be able to offer some insight onto that, into that question now, or Scott, that may be one that you want to prepare for when you come to the community's meeting, the neighborhood association meeting, and have a response for them.
I don't want to backtrack too much, but when I say things like 25 tons, I know that sounds huge, but again, that's a quarter of the major source threshold. So where we get into folks' plans for those are folks that store huge quantities that have a possibility for a much bigger impact. Again, it's your all's neighborhood. Even a fire in a wooden structure can be very dangerous. So those are important concerns. They're not what is covered in our permit. And our permit, although doesn't specifically detail those plans, it in no way condones or allows or gives any reason for a facility to operate unsafely and to not have plans in place for those possible spills or releases. Who's up, Andy?
Okay. Next question from Tom Harold regarding emissions of particulate matter and other pollutants which limited pet. Has there ever been a stack test or are the limits being set by reference to general literature on what would be expected from the process?
Randy and Eva might be asking you to jump in. I believe there's been stack testing to see what is emitted, as far as how much particulate from a process, as well as how effective the control devices that reduce that particulate are. I'm not sure the date of that last testing, and I'm not sure we'll have that today. But again, when we look at that, we're looking at the specific design of the system, how much material moves through it, which is tracked. And Tom may be hitting on emission factors. EPA and many other sources tell you, if you're mixing this much powder and the powder has a particulate size of this and a moisture content of that, you can make those pretty accurate estimates. And then it's about verifying that there is a tight system and that control device is functioning as proper. I'm not seeing a mute come off, but do either of y'all have a stack test date familiar?
It was in 2013.
2013, okay. And again, I can understand this may not come across great, but this agency's been working with dust and powders moving around. Filtration systems, although improve, are not something that's in a research grade level, and we have a really good grasp on these things. I say good news. I got to watch how I talk, but to me, the good news is with pigment, if they are excessively releasing dust, it is a problem, but it's not one that can't be seen and dealt with. So it looks like there was at least a couple noted a good number of years ago where there were some observed dusts, and we worked with the company to figure out what was going on. But that is something in their permit that we call visible emission surveys. Just go and look, which we do as well. And then that stack testing occurs, that knowledge about the designs of these controls. A lot of these filters are tested in a lab and certified before they're sold. So it really is an engineering analysis. And we think we have a pretty good grasp on how much particulate is emitted. For a facility like this, it really comes down to, are those filters intact? Are there any holes in them? And I believe this permit calls for pressure drop monitoring, which lets you know if the filter has a hole. We have a 2 to 8 inch water column on the differential pressure drop across that filter. So there are techniques to do that. Not sure if that really got to your question, Tom.
As a follow-up to that question, how frequently is stack testing to determine efficiency of controls? And does the control equipment decline in efficiency over time? Also from Tom.
So some regulations, a lot of regulations require an initial stack test. Some require repetitive, and we are certainly well within our rights to require retesting. As a general rule of thumb, we like a number from the last 10 years. But some sources test annually, and some, because of the simple in operation nature, don't need to be tested. A filter in a spray booth at a body shop, for example, doesn't get tested in our world. But that 10 year is a pretty good mark on a not so finicky system. Now, when you're talking about catalytic reduction for NOx, those do deteriorate. Oxidizers and scrubbers for your volatile chemicals, and those typically need to be maintained at a higher level and tested more often.
Okay. Next question from Maria Gurin. Can Scott provide his email for contact? I guess we can get
Scott, do we still have, or is he unmuted?
I caught just a little bit. I caught email is all I could catch on that.
Maria Gurin is wanting to know if you can provide your email for contacts.
I will. So I'll be at the meeting. I believe it's next week or the week after. I will gladly give an email that we can, open contact with.
Okay. The next question, this is also for Scott from Tom Fitzgerald. Is fourth subject to reporting under the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act? And does it handle any SARA chemicals? And if so, what quantities are stored on site? Were you able to get that one, Scott? And I'm not seeing a voice connection for Scott right now, so he may be having some connection issues.
Let's maybe go with another question, but we'll see if he gets back on.
We had a question here from Steve Magre. Given the lack of importance for the review of this vote to steer forth to shut down or change, why not extend the time frame for the reason of taking on a traditional meeting to allow true exchanges and impact of citizens together on this issue?
So again, this is a meeting to discuss the Fort's operations, and the what's open now is a draft permit to renew their operating permit. And if it's not issued, that doesn't mean the plant shuts down. They would simply need to comply with their old current permit, which is very similar to this permit here. So I think we've actually beefed up some of the monitoring and record keeping. So this isn't about a vote to have them shut down or change. We expect all companies to comply with their permits. We know that doesn't happen, and sometimes have to take enforcement and work through it that way. Our main goal is to get compliance. Specifically here, one of our goals was to eliminate this odor. Again, not sure if that's happened, but we as an agency are open to continued dialogue with all citizens of Louisville, and that may not get the action you want, but the concept of either voiding a permit or issuing a shutdown order is typically associated with an extremely bad actor, and the violation process, which we don't currently have any violations outstanding with this facility, is worked through in an administrative process. So again, I can, at least if I put myself in your all's seat, not feel fully satisfied, certainly not happy with the time frames, but we're not holding their authority to operate as either they get to go and do whatever or we shut them down. We are reposting the speed limit, if you will, and we expect them to meet that speed limit. And I think we are hearing folks saying there's significant concern and that we do want to take a close look. But, if there is an infraction that requires either violations or, which really is not common, an attempt to void permits, that can happen with a currently issued permit. That's not, the fact that you receive a permit recently is not a defense against current and ongoing issues. And I hope that makes sense. I realize I don't speak normal English. Rachel, I think I see your hand up.
Yeah, and I want to focus on where we're at in this process. And as Matt said, we do have a draft permit, and the way our process works, we offer that permit up for public comment. Here we've had 2 public comment periods. The district will be responding to those comments in writing. We do take what you have shared with us very seriously, and before we make a decision, we will have responded to those comments and created a record. At this point, typically in our process, if there are germane unresolved issues, then there may be a public hearing. Public hearing, as opposed to this public meeting in this format, kind of similar. We're just asking for the public comment. There's no back and forth, no dialogue. So we simply give people an opportunity to share their thoughts with us in person. Given COVID-19, that public hearing would look a lot like this meeting. But even after we issue a permit, not this permit, but every permit, or make a final determination, people who are aggrieved may take action if they disagree with our determination. So, again, we do take your input seriously. And, thank you so much for helping us try out this format tonight. Not perfect. I wish we could be in person. But for the time being, this may be the most effective way for us to hear from folks. So I do thank you for your time.
Looks like we got a few more hands. I know we said we go till 7:30. I think at least everybody at APCD is willing to hang out a little longer. So Andy, who's our next?
The hands that are raised are Abby Long and Maria, which they've actually been raised the entire time. So I'm not sure if they have a question. If you do, let us know. It may be from the original hand raise, but if you do have an additional question, I will unmute you, Abby, to see.
I didn't realize my hand was still raised, but sorry, let me go through my list.
No problem. Thank you, Abby. And Maria, also, do you have any additional questions?
Hi, yes. I do want to thank you all for being here. I know that this is your evening, and I appreciate that you guys have taken the time to hear from us and answer our questions. My only question is, if MSD and APCD and Fourth are going to be engaged in ongoing monitoring, when can the neighborhood association expect an updated report, or would we need to do additional open records requests in order to receive that information?
So as far as the monitoring of those constituents in the sewer, that's going to be, something that MSD and Fourth are handling. We certainly understand they tie into these odors, and we do have a role in odors, but we won't have sampling data from those sewers. But MSD should be able to provide that. It might take an open records request, but they may be willing to. I can't speak for them. Fourth may also be willing to share that with you. As far as the permit reporting, again, that's not looking at that wastewater, but those things that help us understand what's going to the air. That is obviously open recordsable, but as we work through this, I don't know if with the next report, we could build a slight group to send that out to or something of that nature. I will say we also do a monthly board report that deals with complaints and investigations. So that would be a good way, that's online every month, to see who else might be concerned and what we're finding when we go out. So there's a few ways to get at it. Our open records process is actually pretty quick and might be quicker than me, but if there's a way we can get it to you quicker, I'm not against that concept. But again, it probably won't be from the air pollution permit reporting too detailed into the sewer conditions.
Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the only other thing I have in here is from Tom, actually thanking the staff and Scott for attending the meeting. And that is all we have left.
All right. Well, appreciate everybody sticking around. We won't cut. If we see another hand come up, we'll give it a try. But, I got a lot of good information, and just, it may not come across, but we need public participation in all of our processes. That's the only way we get better. But I think I'm taking away a few things. But one thing is that folks aren't satisfied in understanding. They're not satisfied in the communication. So we're going to continue to work this permit process. At a minimum, there'll be a written response to the comments made. But irregardless of this permit, my email address is matt.king@louisvilleky.gov, but that's on our website. My phone number is 502-574-6714. We'll try to talk anytime. It may not be fun, or you may decide to stop calling me, but just like companies who want to schedule a meeting, citizens can do the same. So it doesn't always change air quality in a neighborhood, but it often does. So please continue to look for those opportunities to communicate with us. And we will, do our best to address those issues and explain where we're coming from. Andy, see any more questions out there? And does anybody from APCD want to make any additional remarks?
Matt Rubin wants to thank yourself, Rachel, and APCD staff for frank answers to their questions. That is everything that I have in the chat and the Q&A.
Great, and like I said, we appreciate that too. I think most of us have all been in much rougher meetings, so I appreciate everybody's willingness to just talk about this stuff, and even if you're not satisfied, I appreciate everybody's willingness to participate. Again, anybody from APCD want to add any final remarks? Looks like Keith does. Go for it, Keith.
I really just wanted to thank everyone for getting on, and I wanted to just point out that I know it feels cumbersome, and it's probably not the best way, and it's certainly not the quickest way, but this really is the process by which change occurs. And so everybody's willingness to come, sit at the table, ask your questions, get your answers. I know there will be additional opportunities to do that and additional questions that will come up, but this really is the way that this business gets taken care of. And the only way we know that there are issues is when you tell us that there are issues. And I know we don't make change happen as quickly as folks would like for it to happen, but this is the way that you make it happen. So I just wanted to thank everyone for coming out, taking time out of their day to let us know what's going on in the community, because that's how this works. And wish everybody a happy 4th.
Thank you, Keith, and really thanks to everybody who took the time to participate. Certainly the APCD staff, but really the neighbors and citizens around the facility. So thanks, everybody. Keep your eyes open, watch our website, sign up for our mailing lists, and we will do our best to keep everybody informed. Thanks.
Thank you.